This account is in the Vatican's own archives, and it portrays one of the most terrifying demonic manifestations ever known. Proceed with the understanding that learning about evil can affect your mind and emotions.
For 23 years, I served the parish of Cedar Hollow, Iowa, one of those small towns lost in the middle of nowhere, where everyone knows everyone, and secrets are buried deeper than the dead in the church cemetery. I thought I had seen it all. Disturbing confessions, families destroyed by sin, even an exorcism many years ago when I was young and believed evil had a face and a name. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened that autumn of 2019, when I received a desperate call from a woman asking me to come to her farm, 15 kilometers from town. Her voice trembled. It wasn't ordinary fear. It was the kind of dread you feel when you realize something has broken the laws you thought governed the world. I took my Bible, holy water, and the crucifix I inherited from my mentor and drove down Route 52, that dirt road that cuts through the cornfields like an open wound in the landscape. It was late afternoon, and the sky had that sickly orange color, as if it were bleeding. The wind blew strong, making the crops undulate in movements that seemed almost alive. The farm was isolated, surrounded by kilometers of cornfields in all directions. When you arrived there, you had the impression of being off the map, in a place where normal rules no longer applied. I drove slowly, observing the surrounding fields. There was something wrong with that silence. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. It was as if nature itself avoided that place. The house appeared on the horizon, an old, white wooden construction, with peeling paint and a porch that creaked, even when no one was stepping on it. The windows were closed, despite the suffocating heat of that afternoon. A sense of weight descended upon my shoulders when I turned off the car engine. The silence was so dense that I could hear my own heart beating. I sat there for a few seconds, looking at that house, and something inside me, that quiet voice we call intuition, whispered, "Go back, leave, don't go in there." But I was a man of God, and men of God don't run from evil. They face it. I climbed the porch steps, and the wood groaned under my weight, as if complaining about my presence. Before I could knock on the door, it opened. The couple was there. He was a big man, with hands calloused from hard work, with deep, dark circles under his eyes that revealed sleepless nights. She seemed to have aged 10 years since I last saw her at Mass months ago. They invited me in with hurried, almost nervous gestures, as if they didn't want me exposed outside for too long. The living room was dark, with the curtains drawn. There was a smell of old coffee and something else, that musty odor that permeates houses that have been closed up for too long, even when people live in them. We sat at the kitchen table, and that's when they started telling me their story. They said that 3 months ago things had started to go wrong on the farm. First it was the animals. The chickens stopped laying eggs and became agitated, as if something invisible was chasing them. Then 2 cows appeared dead in the pasture, with no apparent injuries, just wide-open eyes, fixed on something only they could see. The corn crop, which had always been generous, began to dry in strange circles, as if something was draining the life from the soil. They tried everything, new fertilizer, different irrigation, but nothing worked. And then came the sounds. Footsteps upstairs when the 2 of them were in the kitchen, knocking on the walls during the early hours of the morning, the creaking of the barn door, opening by itself, always at 3 in the morning. I listened to all of it with the attention of someone who has dealt with many stories of affliction. My first impression was rational, as always. Neighbor problems, some land dispute, maybe even sabotage. I asked if they had enemies in the region, if anyone had an interest in that property. The man shook his head slowly, but there was something in his eyes, a hesitation, as if he knew my logical explanation didn't even come close to the truth. The woman got up and went to the window, pulling the curtain slightly aside to look outside. Her fingers trembled. She said it wasn't human, that there was something on that land, something that didn't want them to stay there. I tried to calm them with words of faith. I spoke about how fear can make us see things that don't exist, how the human mind creates patterns where there are only coincidences. But even as I spoke, a part of me felt there was something more. The temperature in that house was different. Even with all the windows closed, there was a persistent cold draft that shouldn't have been there. I suggested I stay for a few days, investigate the property, talk to them, pray for the house. Perhaps it was just a matter of bringing some spiritual peace to that place. They accepted with visible relief, as if my presence was a shield against whatever was tormenting them. That first night, I slept in the guest room upstairs. The mattress was firm but uncomfortable, and the room smelled stuffy. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the farm settling down for the night. The wind made the cornfield whisper outside, a constant murmur that sounded almost like distant voices. Everything seemed normal. Tiring, yes. Sad, certainly, but normal. It was only when the clock struck 3 in the morning that I heard it. A slow, deliberate creak, coming from somewhere below me, as if someone was dragging something heavy across the kitchen floor. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and waited. The sound stopped, and then silence returned. But it was a different silence now, denser, as if something was holding its breath with me. The next morning, I went down for coffee and found the couple already awake, with that look of having not slept a wink all night. I asked if they had heard anything during the night. The man stopped stirring his coffee and looked at his wife. She just nodded, saying nothing. They had heard it too. They always heard it, and always at 3 in the morning, at the exact moment. Decided I needed to investigate the property during the day while there was still light. Perhaps I would find some rational explanation. Wild animals, structural problems with the house, anything that could justify those sounds. I walked around the farm, examining the barn, the fences, the fields. The sun was strong, but even so, I felt a persistent chill creeping up my spine. It was when I got close to the cornfield that I noticed something strange. There were tracks between the plants, not normal human walking tracks, but something different, as if something had dragged its feet, leaving irregular marks on the dirt ground. I followed one of these tracks for a few meters, entering the cornfield. The wind had completely stopped, and the cornstalks stood motionless, like silent sentinels around me. That's when I felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. I quickly turned around, but no one was there. Just the endless rows of corn stretching in all directions. But I knew, with that primitive certainty that comes from the depths of our survival instinct, that something was there with me, something that moved among the plants, that followed me, that watched me. I hurried back to the house, trying not to run, trying to maintain the dignity of a man of faith, but my heart was pounding and my hands were sweating cold. When I looked back one last time before leaving the cornfield, I swore I saw something move. A dark shadow taller than a man gliding between the plants. I went back to the house and decided to talk more deeply with the couple. I needed to understand the full story of that place. We sat at the kitchen table again, and that's when they told me something they should have mentioned from the beginning. They were not alone when they started working that land. They had hired help, 3 different people over the past few months. None of them stayed longer than a week. The first one left in the middle of the night, leaving all his belongings behind. He simply disappeared, and when they tried to call, the number no longer existed. The second lasted 5 days. He said he saw things moving out of the corner of his eyes, shadows that shouldn't have been there. On the last day, he was found in the barn, huddled in a corner, trembling and muttering something about, "He's coming." The third was the worst. He only stayed 3 nights. On the morning of the 4th day, he woke up screaming, saying something had touched his face while he slept, cold, rough fingers like dry branches. He left before breakfast, and never responded to attempts at contact again. A shiver ran down my spine. 3 people, all with disturbing experiences, all fleeing as if their lives depended on it. I asked why they hadn't told me this before. The woman lowered her eyes, ashamed. She said they were afraid I wouldn't believe them, that I would think they were crazy, that no one in town took seriously what was happening there. But now, I was there. Now, I had felt that invisible gaze following me through the cornfield. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, I decided to perform a complete blessing of the property. I took my holy water and began to walk along the farm's boundaries, praying aloud. It was when I reached the west side of the house that I found something that made me stop. There were marks on the wooden wall, deep scratches, as if something had tried to get in. But they weren't animal marks. They were too long, strangely spaced. And most disturbing, they started about 2.5 meters high, much higher than any terrestrial animal could reach. I touched the marks with my fingertips. The wood was cold, icy, even under the afternoon sun. It was then that I heard a sound coming from the barn, a slow metallic drag, like chains being pulled across the concrete floor. I looked at the barn. The door was ajar, swaying slightly, as if someone had just passed through. But I knew no one was inside. The couple was in the house, and there were no more employees. So who or what was making that sound? I walked slowly towards the barn, each step feeling heavier than the last. The sound had stopped, but the door continued to sway slightly, as if something had just left. I carefully pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, breaking the silence almost violently. Inside, the late afternoon light entered in dusty beams through the cracks in the boards. There was nothing. Tools hanging on the walls, hay bales stacked in the back, the smell of old wood and machine oil. But the air was different, dense, heavy, like before a storm. That's when I noticed the footprints on the dusty floor. They weren't human footprints. They were circular, irregular marks, as if something had been dragged, or as if something without defined feet had walked there. That night, I suggested we all stay together in the living room. There was a growing feeling that separating would not be safe. We sat in silence, only the ticking of the clock on the wall marking the passage of time. The couple kept their eyes fixed on the windows, as if expecting to see something emerge from the darkness outside. At 9 o'clock, we heard the first sound. A soft scratching at the back door, like nails or claws, testing the wood. The man stood up, grabbed the shotgun he kept by the sofa, but before he could take 2 steps, the sound stopped. We waited for 5 full minutes in absolute stillness. Nothing happened. At 10:30, it was the window's turn. Light, rhythmic knocks, as if someone was calling to come in. But when we looked, no one was there, just our pale reflections in the dark glass. The woman began to pray softly, her lips trembling. I joined her, my voice sounding firmer than I actually felt. The knocking continued for almost 20 minutes, moving from window to window, circling the house like a predator testing its prey's weak points. And then, silence again. But this time it was different. It was the silence of something waiting, watching, measuring its next actions. Midnight arrived, and with it, an unnatural cold descended upon the house. We could see our breath forming clouds of vapor in the air. The man added more wood to the fireplace, but the flames seemed weak, unable to ward off that cold that came from within, not from outside. It was then that the lights began to flicker, not all at once, one by one, in sequence, as if something was walking through the house, turning lights off and on as it passed. We followed the pattern with our eyes. Living room, hallway, kitchen, stairs. Whatever it was going upstairs. The clock struck 1 in the morning when we heard the footsteps. Clear, distinct, deliberate. Someone, or something, was walking upstairs. They weren't normal human footsteps. There was something wrong with the rhythm, the weight. It was as if whoever was walking had joints that bent at impossible angles. The footsteps went from room to room, stopping occasionally, as if they were looking for something or someone. I clutched my crucifix tightly, feeling the cold metal bite into my palm. I began to recite a prayer of protection, but my voice came out trembling, weak. By 2 a.m, the couple was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The woman was crying silently, and the man held the shotgun so tightly that his knuckles were white. I knew there was an hour left. At 3 a.m, something always happened, they had warned me. I decided that when the time came, I would go upstairs. I needed to confront whatever it was. Not as a priest, but as a man, as someone who needs to face evil head-on to protect the innocent. The minutes dragged like hours. The silence now was so heavy, it seemed to crush my chest. 2:45. The air was so cold we started to shiver. The fireplace had gone out by itself, despite being full of wood. 2:50. A smell began to spread through the house. Wet earth, mold, and something else. Something rotten like decaying flesh. 2:55. All the sounds of the farm ceased. There was no wind, no crickets, not even our breaths seemed to make a sound. It was as if the whole world was holding its breath. 3 a.m, and then it began. A knock on the front door. Strong, violent, making the whole structure of the house tremble. Then another, and another, and another. But it wasn't a knock of fists. It was something bigger, heavier, as if a tree trunk was being used as a battering ram. The windows began to shake in their frames. Pictures fell from the walls. Plates rattled in the kitchen cupboards. And then we heard it. Coming from everywhere at once, from upstairs, from the basement, from inside the walls. A sound that wasn't exactly a voice, but carried intention. A hoarse, dragging sound that formed something that sounded almost like words, but in a language no human should know. I stood up, holding my crucifix in front of my body like a weapon. I began to shout prayers, my voice competing with that horrible sound that filled every inch of the house. And suddenly, everything stopped. Absolute silence, as if someone had flipped a switch. The clock read 3:07 in the morning. We stood there, the three of us, trembling, sweating despite the cold, not daring to move. It was the man who broke the silence. His voice came out hoarse, broken. He said we needed to get out of there, that it wasn't going to stop, that it was getting worse every night, but I couldn't just leave. Not without understanding what was happening, not without trying to help them. Absolute silence, as if someone had flipped a switch. The clock read 3:07 in the morning. We stood there, the three of us, trembling, sweating despite the cold, not daring to move. I waited for dawn, and as soon as the first light of day began to clear the horizon, I left the house. I needed to investigate that cornfield more thoroughly. Something told me the answer was there, in the middle of those plants that moved even without wind. The morning fog covered the fields like a sheet of ghosts. I walked with determination, but my heart was pounding. It was then that I saw, for the first time clearly, in the middle of the cornfield, exactly 50 meters from the house. A figure, tall, dark, with arms outstretched, as if nailed to an invisible cross. It wore tattered clothes that swayed slightly in the morning breeze. A scarecrow, but there was something deeply wrong with it. The way it was positioned, the angle of its head, the way its arms seemed too long. And even 50 meters away, even in the fog, I could feel that thing watching me. Its eyes, or whatever was in place of its eyes, were fixed on me. I returned to the house with quick steps, almost running. My mind was working frantically, trying to put together the pieces of that macabre puzzle. I entered through the kitchen door and found the couple sitting at the table, with that empty expression of someone who had spent the night awake facing horrors. I told them I had found something, that perhaps I had an explanation for all of it. I explained that there was a scarecrow in the middle of the cornfield, a disturbing figure, poorly positioned, with wrong proportions. I said that symbols and objects can carry negative energy, especially when they are created or placed with ill intentions. I suggested that perhaps someone had purposefully planted it there, as a type of spell or curse. that the presence of that thing could be generating all those phenomena, confusing our minds, creating collective hallucinations, distorting our perception. I suggested we destroy the scarecrow, burn it, and bless the land where it stood, that doing so could break whatever was happening there. The man looked at me with a confused, almost irritated expression. He opened his mouth to speak, but it was the woman who uttered the words that froze my blood. There is no scarecrow in the cornfield. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. I repeated, my voice trembling. I had seen it. It was there, a tall figure in tattered clothes with outstretched arms. The man stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. He said, in a voice that mixed fear and despair, that they had never put a scarecrow there, that they didn't need one, that the farm never had a scarecrow. The woman began to cry, her hands covering her face. She said I shouldn't have gone there, that I shouldn't have looked at it, because if I saw it, then it saw me too. At that moment, something changed. The air inside the house grew heavy, charged, as if a storm was about to explode. All the windows flew open at once, slamming against the walls with violent force. The wind rushed in like a furious wave, knocking over everything on tables and counters. And then we heard it, coming from the cornfield, a sound that was not wind, not animal, not anything that belonged to this world. It was a scream, or perhaps many screams mixed together, sharp, ragged, full of anger and hunger. I ran to the window and looked out. My heart almost stopped. The cornfield was moving, not swaying with the wind. It was actively moving, the plants bending and parting as if something enormous was walking through them towards the house. And there, in the midst of that wave of movement, I could see it. That figure, the scarecrow that should not exist. It was moving, not walking, not running, something worse. It was gliding between the plants, its overly long arms stretching out to the sides, its head tilted at an impossible angle, as if its neck were broken, and it was coming straight for the house. I screamed at the couple that we needed to leave immediately. There was no more time for prayers, for blessings, for attempts to understand. There was only the primitive need to flee. The man grabbed the truck keys. The woman clutched a backpack with documents. I took only my Bible and my crucifix. We ran to the front door, but when we opened it, we froze. It was there, on the porch, less than 5 meters from us. Now that I saw it up close, I realized that it had never been a real scarecrow. It was something that had disguised itself as one, something that had stood there, motionless, waiting. Its head was made of torn burlap, but through the slits I could see there was no straw inside. There was something dark, something that pulsed, something that seemed made of solidified shadow. Its arms were too long, its hands ended in fingers that looked like twisted branches, with sharp tips that scraped against the wooden floor. And the eyes, 2 black holes in the fabric face, but within them was light. A pale, sickly light that seemed to suck all hope from anyone who looked. I backed away, pushing the couple behind me. I began to recite an exorcism prayer, my voice shouting the sacred words. The thing tilted its head to the other side, that unnatural movement of a predatory bird. And then it made a sound I will never forget. It was laughter, a hoarse, scratchy laugh as if coming from a throat full of dirt and insects. It found it amusing. My prayers, my faith, my pathetic attempt to confront it. The man pushed me aside and fired the shotgun. The sound was deafening inside the house. The projectiles passed through the thing, tearing fabric and whatever was inside. But it didn't fall. It didn't retreat. It didn't even seem to feel it. Instead, it took a step forward, and another. The porch boards cracked under its weight, as if it were made of something much denser than it should be. We ran out the back door. There was no choice. We needed to reach the truck parked on the other side of the house. We ran through the yard, our feet tripping over scattered tools and objects. Behind us, we heard that sound, the heavy dragging, the cracking of wood, the tearing of metal. The thing was coming, and it was fast. faster than anything of that size should be. We reached the truck and the man opened the door with trembling hands. The three of us squeezed into the cabin, desperate. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine coughed, failed. He turned it again. Another sputter. I looked through the rear window and saw the thing turn the corner of the house. It had grown, or perhaps it had always been that size and only now revealed its true form. It was almost 3 meters tall, its arms dragging on the ground, its head brushing the barn's gutter. Third attempt. The engine roared to life. The man slammed his foot on the accelerator and the truck sped forward, kicking up a cloud of dust and gravel. We sped down the dirt road, the wheels skidding on the turns. I looked in the side mirror. The thing was following us, not running, simply appearing. Each time I blinked, it was closer, gliding down the road as if the laws of physics didn't apply to it. First it was 100 meters away, then 50, then 20. I could hear its branch-like fingers scraping the air, trying to reach the back of the truck. The woman screamed. The man pressed the accelerator to the limit. I held my crucifix and prayed aloud, my voice competing with the roar of the engine. We reached the curve where the cornfield ended and the main road began. The man took the turn so fast that the truck almost overturned, 2 wheels lifting off the ground. I looked back one last time. The thing had stopped, exactly at the boundary where the farm ended. It stood there, motionless, that impossible silhouette outlined against the dawn sky. And then, slowly, it began to walk back. Not defeated, just waiting. We kept driving, 10 kilometers, 15, 20. We didn't stop until we reached the Cedar Hollow police station. When we finally got out of the truck, our legs barely supported us. We were covered in cold sweat, trembling in shock. I tried to explain to the sheriff what had happened, but the words came out confused, disconnected. How do you explain something that defies all logic, all reason? The sheriff looked at us with a mixture of concern and disbelief. He said he would send a team to check the property, but I knew they wouldn't find anything, at least not during the day. Not while that thing was hidden, waiting, camouflaged as something that shouldn't be alive. 3 days have passed since that night. 3 days that felt like 3 years. The couple left Cedar Hollow. They didn't go back for anything. Clothes, documents, family memories. They simply vanished, and no one in town knew where they went. I don't blame them. I would have disappeared too if I could. But I was the town priest. I had responsibilities. And more importantly, I needed to understand what had happened on that farm. I spent those days searching the parish archives, old records in the municipal library, yellowed newspapers no one had read for decades. It was on the 3rd day that I found something, a newspaper article from 1952, buried among pages about harvests and rural weddings. The headline read, "Farm worker disappears under mysterious circumstances." The body of a man had been found in the middle of a cornfield, the same cornfield where the couple's farm now stood. He was standing with his arms outstretched, covered in crows that had made a feast of him. What caught my attention was a detail in the report. Witnesses said the body seemed to have been there for weeks, but the man had only been missing for 3 days. The case was never solved. I continued researching, going deeper and deeper. I found other reports. A death in 1931, another in 1908, always on the same land, always in the middle of the cornfield, and always with the same description: bodies found standing, arms outstretched like human scarecrows. A pattern began to form in my mind, a pattern I didn't want to accept, but that made terrifying sense. That land was marked, contaminated. Something had happened there, something long before the farms, before the settlers, perhaps even before the natives who inhabited that region. Something had claimed that place, and it wasn't going to let anyone stay. I went back to the church records, looking for blessings or exorcisms performed on that property. I found 3. One in 1934, performed by a priest who died 6 months later under unexplained circumstances. Another in 1967, done by a Protestant pastor who had a nervous breakdown and never returned to ministry. And a third in 1989, performed by the priest who preceded me, the same one who left me the crucifix I carried. He never talked about that farm, but now I understood why. There was a note in the margin of the 1989 records, written in shaky handwriting. It's not a haunting. It's something that was here before, something that was awakened and cannot be sent back. It can only be avoided. I read those words dozens of times, feeling a shiver run down my spine. My mentor knew. He had seen that thing too, and he had chosen not to tell me, perhaps to protect me, or perhaps because he knew there was nothing that could be done. I put away the documents and left the library as the sun was already setting. That night, in my parish house, I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't rest. I saw that figure whenever I closed my eyes, that impossible thing disguised as a scarecrow. Around midnight, I woke up to a sound, something scraping at my bedroom window. I got up slowly, my heart pounding. I approached the window and pulled back the curtain with trembling fingers. There was nothing outside, just the empty street, lit by Cedar Hollow's weak streetlights. But on the window glass from the outside, there were marks, scratches, long, deep, recent. I backed away from the window, tripping over my own bed. I grabbed my crucifix and holy water, blessing every corner of the room. It was then that I noticed something disturbing, a smell that shouldn't have been there, wet earth, mold, and that unmistakable odor of decaying plants, the smell of the cornfield. I opened the bedside table drawer and grabbed my phone. I called the sheriff, my hands trembling so much I almost dropped the device. He answered in a sleepy voice. I told him about the marks on the window, about my research, about everything I had discovered. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said something that sent a chill down my spine. The team had gone to the farm the day after our escape. They had found the house empty as expected, but they also found something else. Footprints around the property, footprints that were not human nor of known animals, footprints that went from the house to the cornfield and then simply disappeared among the plants. And in the exact center of the cornfield, they found an empty space, a perfect circle where nothing grew, as if something had stood there for a very long time, killing everything around it. The sheriff said he had closed the case as vandalism and unexplained events, that it was best to leave that property alone. But before hanging up, he said something that still echoes in my mind. He said one of the officers who went there swore he saw something in the middle of the cornfield, a tall, motionless figure watching as they investigated. When he pointed for the others to see, there was nothing there, but everyone felt it. That feeling of being watched, of being measured, of being marked. I hung up the phone and sat on the bed, trembling. I looked at the window. The marks were still there, illuminated by the faint streetlight. And then I understood, with a terrible, absolute clarity. That thing hadn't let us escape out of kindness. It had let us go because it wanted to, because it had other plans. It had seen me, it had looked me in the eyes, and now it knew where I lived. Now I was part of its land, marked just like everyone else who had the misfortune to cross its path. I got up and started packing. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in Cedar Hollow. As I put clothes in my suitcase, I heard it again, that sound, scraping. But now it wasn't coming from the window, it was coming from the door. Someone, or something, was on the other side, slowly, methodically scratching the wood, as if it had all the time in the world, as if it knew that no matter where I fled, I would eventually return. Everyone eventually returned, because that land called, and what belonged to it could not escape forever. I grabbed my crucifix tightly, felt the metal bite into my skin. I took a deep breath and decided I wouldn't look at the door. I wouldn't open it. I wouldn't give it the satisfaction of seeing me afraid. The sound continued for 5 more minutes. Then it stopped. I waited another half hour before I dared to approach the door. When I finally looked through the peephole, there was nothing in the hallway. But when I slowly opened the door, I found something that confirmed my worst fears. On the floor, right in front of my door, there was a small mound of dark, damp earth. And buried in it, small, still green, still living cornstalks. Like a promise or a threat. I left Cedar Hollow the next morning, before dawn. I requested a transfer to another diocese, in another state, as far as possible from that cursed town. My request was accepted without question. Perhaps they knew. Perhaps there were records I hadn't found, warnings passed from priest to priest. But before leaving, I went to the church one last time. I knelt before the altar and prayed. Not for the salvation of my soul, but for forgiveness. Forgiveness for having abandoned that couple, for not having been able to protect them, for having failed in my mission. Today, 3 years later, I live in a quiet parish in Maine, far from cornfields, far from isolated farms, far from Cedar Hollow. But some nights, when the wind blows from the right direction, I swear I can smell it. That scent of wet earth and corn, that invisible presence watching, waiting, and I know that one day, perhaps years from now, perhaps tomorrow, I will wake up and find something at my door. A mound of earth, corn stalks, a reminder that some things don't let us go, that some lands mark us forever, and that in the middle of that cornfield in Iowa, something is still standing, motionless, waiting for the next visitor who will have the misfortune to look at it and to be seen in return. There are things that change us, experiences that fracture something within our soul, something that never goes back to being the same. For 23 years, I believed that faith was an unbreakable shield, that prayers had absolute power over evil, that God's light would always conquer darkness. On that farm in Cedar Hollow, I learned that there are darknesses that do not recognize light, that there are evils older than any religion, deeper than any faith, and that broke me in a way I'll never be able to fully fix. Some nights, I wake up screaming. I dream that I'm back in that cornfield, and that thing is approaching, its impossible arms reaching out to me. I wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I think it will explode. I get up and check all the windows, all the doors, looking for marks, for dirt, for signs that it found me. My colleagues here at the new parish think I suffer from PTSD. They're not wrong, but they don't know, and never will know, what truly traumatized me. How do you explain to someone who saw something that shouldn't exist? How do you make someone understand that there are places in this world where the laws of reality bend, where impossible things not only exist, but wait? I stopped going to cornfields. I can't. When I see cornfields from the road, my whole body freezes. My hands start to tremble. That smell, that whisper of plants in the wind, everything brings me back to that place. I avoid rural areas whenever possible. I stay in cities where there is light, where there are people, where there are witnesses, as if that made a difference, as if that thing needed darkness or solitude to act. I know it's irrational. I know I'm far away. I know I should have gotten over it, but fear is not rational, and what I saw on that farm planted a seed of terror in me that will never stop growing. Sometimes I wonder about the couple, where they are now, if they manage to rebuild their lives, if they also wake up screaming in the middle of the night, or if perhaps they didn't really escape, if that thing found them wherever they went. That's the part that haunts me the most, the idea that no matter how far you run, some things follow you. Not physically, perhaps, but in memory, in nightmares, in the constant feeling of being watched. I tried to research to find out what happened to them, but it's as if they completely disappeared. No record, no trace, as if they never existed. My faith was never the same after that. I still pray, I still serve, I still wear my cassock and conduct masses. But there's a crack now, a doubt that wasn't there before. Because if something like that can exist, something that doesn't bend to prayers, that doesn't flee from sacred light, that simply watches with those empty eyes and laughs at our faith, then what does that say about everything we believe? I haven't lost my faith in God, but I've lost my faith in the idea that we understand anything about the universe we live in. There are things older than our religions, things that were here before the first word was spoken, before the first sacred symbol was drawn. And they are still here, waiting. 3 years have passed, but to me it feels like yesterday. Time has not healed this wound. It has only covered it with a thin crust that breaks at the slightest touch. I have learned to live with fear. I have learned to function despite the constant terror bubbling just beneath the surface. But I will never forget that feeling of being before something that should not exist, of looking into the eyes of something that looked back and marked me as its own. There are nights when I sit at my bedroom window looking at the empty street, expecting to see a tall, impossible figure emerge from the shadows. Part of me is sure that one day I will see it, that it will finish what it started. Because I made the gravest mistake anyone can make with that kind of thing. I looked directly at it, I recognized it, I saw it for what it truly was. And when you see something like that, when you truly see beyond the disguise, beyond the illusion, you become part of its story. You become another name on a very long list of people who crossed its path and were never the same again, or who simply disappeared, like so many others over the years, leaving only footprints that lead nowhere and unanswered questions. Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if it wouldn't have been better never to have answered that phone call, never to have gone to that farm. But then I remember that the couple needed help, that it was my duty as a priest, as a human being, to try to help them, even if I failed. Even if all I managed was to add another name to the list of traumatized witnesses to that cursed place. The guilt is almost as heavy as the fear. Almost. Today marks exactly 3 years since that night. 3 years since I fled that farm, since I abandoned Cedar Hollow, since I last saw that thing. I should be better. I should have moved on. But here I am, sitting in the dark of my room, unable to sleep, every sound making me jump. The wind blows outside, making the trees creak, a perfectly normal sound, perfectly innocent. But to me it sounds like footsteps, like something approaching, like branch-like fingers scraping on wooden surfaces. I look at the crucifix on my bedside table, the same one I inherited from my mentor, the same one I carried that terrible night. He knew. He had seen that thing too, years before me, and he never told me. Now I understand why. How do you tell someone about something like that? How do you pass on this burden, this knowledge that destroys peace of mind forever? You don't tell. You protect people by leaving them in ignorance, until they inevitably encounter that kind of thing on their own. I wrote this account not as catharsis, but as a warning, so it can be recorded, so that, if something happens to me, someone will know the truth. There is an abandoned farm on the outskirts of Cedar Hollow, Iowa. In the middle of that farm's cornfield, there is something waiting. Don't go there. Don't investigate. Don't look at that figure if you see it from afar. Because if you look, it will look back. And once it sees you, you never fully escape. You spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting, knowing that one day it might decide to visit you, to remind you that you are part of its land now. The clock strikes 3 in the morning. Always 3 in the morning. I hear a sound outside. It's probably just the wind, probably. But my hand is already on the crucifix, my body is already tense, my heart is already racing, because I know the truth. I learned it the hard way. There are things in this world we shouldn't see, places we shouldn't visit, truths we shouldn't know. And once you cross that line, once you see what hides in the shadows between the known and the impossible, you are never the same person again. You live with fear, with the certainty that no matter how far you run, what saw you, is out there, motionless in the middle of a cornfield, with outstretched arms, waiting, always waiting. And that waiting is perhaps the cruelest part of all, because you never know if today is the day, if tonight is the night, if that sound you just heard is just the wind, or if it's something more, something that came to collect what it believes is its own. And there is no prayer, no faith, no light enough in the world to ward off that kind of darkness. There is only living, day after day, night after night, with fear as a constant companion, until perhaps one day I simply don't wake up anymore.
And so ends the account of the Cedar Hollow priest, a story that, according to the records we were able to find, is real. The town exists, the farm exists, and the priest who served that parish for 23 years did indeed request a sudden transfer in 2019, leaving Iowa without explanation. We tried to contact him for this recording. We received no response. The farm in question remains abandoned to this day. No one has bought the property, despite the price having been reduced 5 times in recent years. Local residents do not talk about the place, and when we asked directly, the answers were always the same. It's best to leave that land alone. We searched the municipal archives and found exactly what the priest described. Unexplained deaths on that property spread over decades, always in the same pattern, always without explanation. The last official record dates from 2019, a police report about a property hastily abandoned with signs of possible vandalism. But there is a curious note in the report. One of the officers wrote in the margin, "I recommend that the area be isolated. There is something wrong with that place." The recommendation was ignored. The farm remains accessible. Anyone can enter. But the question remains, would you go in? If you were driving down Route 52, if you saw that dirt road cutting through the cornfields, if curiosity struck, would you dare to go there, to walk through that cornfield, to look for that figure that shouldn't exist? Because if the priest's account is correct, it is still there, waiting, watching, measuring every visitor who has the misfortune to cross its path. And if you see it, if your eyes meet those empty holes where its eyes should be, well then you will understand exactly what the priest felt. Stories like this remind us of something important. There are places in this world that carry weight, locations where something happened, something that left a permanent mark on reality. And sometimes these places do not want to be disturbed. They don't want visitors. They don't want witnesses. The question is, how do you know if you are in one of these places? How do you recognize the signs before it's too late? Perhaps you won't recognize them. Perhaps you will only realize it when that unnatural chill descends upon you, when the silence becomes too heavy, when you feel those invisible eyes watching you from the shadows. Cedar Hollow is a small town, lost in rural Iowa. Chances are you will never pass through there. But there are thousands of towns like it scattered across the country. Isolated places surrounded by fields, by forests, by lands that hold ancient secrets. And in some of these towns, in some of these fields, there may be something waiting. Something that looks harmless from a distance, an old scarecrow, a motionless figure, until you realize it's watching you, that it always has been, that now you are part of its story. If this story left you scared, with that chill down your spine that only a good horror story can provoke, leave your like below. This helps us continue to bring you real, disturbing stories that make you question what is real and what is just imagination. And in the comments, tell us, have you ever had an unexplained experience in a rural area? Have you ever felt that sensation of being watched by something you couldn't see? Have you seen something you can't explain to this day? We want to hear your stories. We want to know if you too have crossed paths with something that shouldn't exist. If you are new here, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Every week we bring real horror stories, stories that will make you sleep with the lights on, that will make you look twice at the shadows in the corner of the room. Share this video with that friend who loves horror stories. But warn them, this is not just any story. This is one of those that stick in your mind, that come back when you least expect it, that make you question every strange sound you hear at night. And if you really want to support the channel and get access to exclusive content, even more disturbing stories that we cannot publish here, check the link in the description for our exclusive community. Before I go, I leave you with one last reflection. Right now, as you watch this video, that farm in Cedar Hollow is still there. The cornfield continues to grow, and in the middle of it, something continues to wait. Motionless, patient, with all the time in the world, waiting for the next curious visitor, for the next skeptic who doesn't believe in horror stories, for the next person who will look at that figure in the distance and think, it's just a scarecrow. Until they realize too late that scarecrows don't watch you back, that scarecrows don't move when you blink, that scarecrows don't leave footprints leading to your door. So the next time you drive down a rural road and you see a cornfield stretching to the horizon, and you notice a solitary figure in the middle of the plants, remember this story. And don't look too long, because if you look, it will notice. And once it notices you, once it marks you as part of its territory, there's not enough distance in the world to fully escape. You will carry that forever, that weight, that fear, that certainty that one day it might decide to visit you. Thank you for watching until the end. Your support means everything to us. Stay safe. Keep the lights on. And if you hear something scratching at your window at 3 in the morning, well, maybe it's best not to check until the next account, if you dare to come back.